Alright guys, so the topic for this week is going to be short and sweet. We're going to get into some advanced JavaScript topics, and I think I'm only going to do two videos because I want this to be a little bit, quicker, not as much length, but hopefully a little, some quality instead of quantity. So before we get into it, I just wanted to introduce you guys to a really useful development tool that all of my coworkers use. A lot of the people that I program with, both professionally and just for fun, we all use JSFiddle. So JSFiddle.net. It's a pretty nice place to just try out some little snippets of combinations of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then you see your result window in the bottom right here. One thing you want to make sure you do is select pure.js, no library pure.js, and no wrap in body to make sure that you're not getting any extra functionality, to make sure it's just raw. So, just as an example, you can type in hi as a paragraph, and when you run it, you'll see your output down here. And if you click save, you'll get a unique link up here, a unique URL that you can share with anybody. There's a lot of tools here that you can explore. So that's pretty much what I'm going to use today to show you the topics that I want to outline. So just to start off, I'm going to create a simple little piece of HTML here to start with. I'm going to say h2, and I'm going to call this lookma no HTML, even though there is a little bit of HTML, but you'll see what that means in a few minutes. And then I'm going to create another div here, and there's not going to be anything in it at all. I'm just going to give it a class name, class equals grid. And then let's see what I can do with this. We'll say dot grid, and we'll say width equals 200 pixels, and border 1 pix solid black, something like that. So what happens there? Still don't seem like grid. Why not? Class dot grid. Oh, because I'm not typing in valid CSS. See, this is what happens when you start programming for too long. You forget what language you're in. Alright, so, well, I don't have anything in it. That makes sense. So, I have a pretty useless, lousy div there. It's got a border around it and a width, but it's got absolutely no height. Just in case you ever want to look, you can still use the inspect element in Chrome. You can open up that HTML there. This pound document inside of JSFiddle is where all your content is. So you can see inside my body, you can find my grid, and you can see there it really has no height. It's 202 by 2. So, so this leads kind of to where I want to start talking about what we're going to learn this week, and that's what we call unobtrusive JavaScript. So in a nutshell, the idea of unobtrusive JavaScript is not to do things like this. Onclick equals some function. So we alluded to this, last week, and the idea here is you don't want to put anything in the HTML that is promising anything regarding behavior or style. Everything that you do to style your content you want to do over here in your CSS, and everything you do in order to even attach behavior you want to do down here in your JavaScript. So even by doing this, I'm promising that this div has a behavior on it when you click on it, and that is not you don't want to do that in the HTML. So there are obviously different opinions about this. Even when we get to Angular, you'll see that kind of Angular turned things kind of upside down and blended all three of these layers together. So it's not like carved in stone or like an unbreakable rule that you cannot mix the layers. But for at least the purpose of this week, try to bear with me and hopefully buy into the fact that you should keep all the layers separate. The reason being is mixing concerns in the same place is usually not a good idea in any area of computer science, just because a single thing that's supposed to have a single job all of a sudden starts getting convoluted with many different requirements and tasks, and it just gets confusing and ultimately unmaintainable, which is the bottom line. Maintainability and the cost of changing things, we refer to that as internal software quality, and that's like the most important thing in order to have a large application be able to be maintainable for a long time. So, it comes down to money and, being able to maintain large applications. So that's kind of my rant about internal software quality and separation of concerns. So let me give you an example of what actually, there are many, many ways to ensure that you separate these layers, and in this case, make the JavaScript unintrusive. So, here's one example. Let's say I want to do something when the body is done loading, or when the page is done loading. The easiest way to do it, if you Google for something like this, you'll see a lot of code examples that tell you to do something like, when you put your body tag in, put an onload equals in some function. But this again is behavior, and you're intruding upon the HTML. It's just not right. So the unobtrusive way of doing that would be doing something like window.onload equals function, and then putting something in here, alert page load. So if I run that, obviously as soon as the page loads, you see this alert. Now again, I see nothing at all about behavior. Nothing at all about behavior in my HTML, and that's kind of what we call the smell test. If you see nothing about your behavior and nothing about your styling other than some class names, that's kind of optimal. That's perfect. So for the purpose of this, we're gonna. I kind of wanted to start off with something that looked like. Was that it? I think really, my. I'm gonna actually open up what I did in JSFiddle or in GitHub here. So what I did, this is going to be like the end game here. So yeah, I had nothing really but H2 and the grid. All this other stuff was just set up that JSFiddle is doing for me. So you can see this, just know that we're still making an HTML node, we're still making the head, we're still linking to my style sheet, we're still linking to the script. It's just JSFiddle is doing all that for me. So that right there is really the only HTML I'm going to use at all in this entire example. And let me just say before you start thinking that you're not allowed to use HTML. That's not the purpose of what I'm going to do. I don't want to say don't use HTML. I just want to show you that if you really just have a couple of things like this, a header and a div, and you want to put a bunch of style and a bunch of behavior on it, and really there's only two things on the page, and they just have a lot of style and a lot of behavior. That's what it should look like. If there's really just two things there, it makes sense to just see these two things in HTML. So moving on with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating content, or at least behavior, in the JavaScript layer. So this is kind of a fine line philosophically. You can say, oh well, Donnie, you're going to be adding stuff to this grid. You're going to be building this grid, this DOM, with JavaScript. Isn't that wrong? Shouldn't you be, putting the content in HTML? Well, that's really interesting because, most of the time, also I shouldn't say most of the time, but a lot of the time, what you see on the screen is reacting to data. So, again, this is a good rule to follow. Anytime that you see something like this, and I say, okay, I'm going to be building this grid, you ask yourself, do I know what the content is right now? Like, for example, if I knew that I was building a chessboard, maybe I knew that this grid was going to be 8 by 8, and in that case, I could go ahead and build the HTML right here. But what I want to prepare you for is the harder case, where really you don't know what's going to be in this grid. And you have to react to some data being sent back from the server. That we're going to be covering that when we get to the topic about JSON. So it's really a useful skill to be able to use JavaScript to react to data and build pieces of content based on that. So, sorry I talked so long for, about this, but it's really important to understand that you have to make an educated and, kind of intelligent decision whether or not to build a piece of content in the HTML or whether or not to build it in JavaScript. And, there's a bunch of factors that can go into that decision, but hopefully that at least illuminates the decision and some of the factors that go into what you're going to decide. So, but in this case, I'm going to start building some content here, and I'm going to start off by making a function just to make myself a div. I'll call it create div, and I'm going to, let's see, I'll say document.create element named div. I'll hold it onto it in a variable there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the person to say create a div and give it a style. So I'll say, what's the class name? And then when they have the div, so we've created the div, and now the class name that was passed in as the parameter, we want to set that class name equals class name. So this class name right here is the parameter that was passed in, and this is the actual property of the div. So, and then I guess we'll just return the div. And actually, I'm going to give it some inner HTML too. So we'll say give it some text, and then we can say div.inner HTML equals text. This is a nice little useful function here to be able to create myself a div. So what I could do, just as an example, is I could say, let me grab that grid. So let me grab this div right here and add something to it. So let's see, I'll do document.get elements by class name. And I'll pass it grid, and index it by 0, and that hopefully should give me the grid. And just as a sanity check, I'll just kind of alert the grid, or the GURD, either way. And what's going on here? Why do I not have an alert there? Alert test. It's one of the bad things about JSFiddle. It's a little bit hard to debug. Alright, document get elements by class name. See if I typed that right. Oh, capital N figures. Alright, try now. And okay, good, we have the grid. Alright, so I have my grid, and now I want to do something like create div, and I'll give it just some text. I'll say test, and I'll give it a class name of, let's make a class over here. So test class, actually I'm going to call this row, and I will say, just to test it out, border 1 pic solid red. Sure, why not? Row. Okay, so text and class name. And then I'll grab that. So, and let's see if we have that div. We will. It's definitely going to happen. Really? Of course I say definitely, and it doesn't happen. So what went wrong? Div already, oh, forgot my equal sign. I'm a bad programmer tonight. There we go. So I got the div. So now I'm going to simply add it to the grid. So grid dot add element. I think that's it. Div. It's probably not it. Nope. Again, let me look in my GitHub for the right syntax here. Probably should have prepared a little more for this. Append child. That's what I want to do. All right. Append child. All right, cool. So you can see the grid is actually outlined in black, and the div is outlined in red. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually fill this thing out so that it's a real grid. Instead of just appending 1, I'm going to write a little loop here. I equals 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus. And inside of here, I'm going to have 5 rows. So I'm going to have to create and append it inside of the loop. So we should have 5 rows after that. Let's see what happens. ding, 5 rows. And even better than that, after we have, I'm going to call this the row. It's a better name. So after we create the row, let's give the row some cells. So for var j equals 0, j is less than 5, j plus plus. So we're going to loop 5 times. So we're going to create 5 rows, and for each row we're going to create 5 cells. I'm going to create another class over here called .cell. Oopsie. And then this is going to, well, I don't know, I'll just say border 1 pick solid blue for now. And then here we're going to say var cell equals create div. And in here we'll just say, I don't know, x for now and cell. And then we'll add that to the row. Row append child cell. So that should be okay, but we're going to have to do some styling here to make this look like a real grid. So first of all, the cells are going to have to be a, what do you call it, display inline block. So that's going to put the cells one after the other. And now we're going to have to make sure, you know what, let's get rid of the borders around the grid. And, well, we can leave probably the border around the grid. Let's get rid of the borders around the row. Let's get rid of the text, actually, inside of the row. And let's put some width on these cells. Let's actually put some width and height on them. Getting there. And let's just get rid of the grid's width and instead say display table. So now it's going to shrink wrap around the stuff that we have. So that's looking pretty cool. And instead of X, you know, let's actually display like the, first of all, let's even bigger. How about like 40 by 40 or something? So instead of X, let's put the row and like the grid coordinates. So how about we say I plus a comma, oops, I plus a comma, and I can't type, comma, and J. So I comma J. So that's certainly more interesting. And almost there, and then we'll be set up to do a little bit of unobtrusive JavaScript to give this thing some behaviors. Some event binding. And that's going to be kind of like the second and last purpose and point of what we're going through here. So what did we do? We did a double loop, each for basically 25 times we invoked create div, and we have these cells over here. So I think we can get rid of that one. Maybe. Let's see what that looks like. It looks better this way. Let's make them both black. Not really important. That looks good. And let's just center these numbers a little bit. We can do something like in the cell we can say text align center. And then we can give it a little bit of a top margin maybe. Margin top 10, something like that. Whoa. Definitely not margin. We want a padding top on that thing. Alright, it's looking a little better. But you know what? I think I had some nice, perfect paddings that I created over here. What did I do? I said, so this sets in one style, it sets up all of your paddings, both left, right, top, and bottom. I think this looked pretty good. There we go. Beautiful. So I didn't really do anything special yet. The one thing I am going to do, just as a good practice, since this grid is pretty tightly defined, I'm going to say it's not just the row, but it's the row that is the direct descendant of the grid, and this is going to actually be grid, direct descendant row, direct descendant cell. So now I'm really specific just to make sure that these styles don't bleed into any other styles that may have the same names. So let's see, am I set up yet to move to the next spot? I've got my content laid out. I really, obviously I haven't, you don't see anything about the style, anything about the behavior going on here. All you see is, oh, I've got a header, and I've got a grid, and if I want to see what's happening to the grid, I need to look into the JavaScript. And if I want to see how this stuff's being styled, I need to look into the CSS. So this is really the optimal situation that you want to be in. You don't want to define anything here unless you have some seriously dependable content structure. So what I want to do with this from here in the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of techniques for adding behavior to particular, targeting particular elements on the screen, adding event listeners to them without having to say, div on click equals this, or on mouse over equals that. That's intruding upon the HTML and mixing concerns. So we want to do it unobtrusively. And one thing I want to note is that next week we're going to be talking about jQuery, which really takes that to a new level of power and ease of use. jQuery is great for unobtrusive JavaScript, event binding, querying the DOM. It's really amazing for everything. It makes everything a lot easier. So this is kind of the setup for what we're going to do, and then now in the next video I'm going to show you some unobtrusive behaviors in the JavaScript.